"You're fired!" The words hit the mahogany walls like a gunshot. The chairman's voice didn't just echo, it ripped through the boardroom with the violence of a gavel slamming down on a verdict. His finger jabbed the air, trembling with rage, aimed straight at the man who hadn't moved an inch. Across from him, the black CEO sat still, hands folded, suit dark, tie straight, eyes steady, locked not on the man screaming at him but on something deeper, something the others couldn't see yet. The chairman leaned in, his face flushed crimson. "Security! Remove him!" he barked. At once, the room shifted. A uniformed guard stepped forward, palm pressing against the CEO's arm as if he were a trespasser, not the man who had built the empire brick by brick. Gasps slipped out from the board members lining the table. Some smirked, eager to watch his fall. Others, phones discreetly raised, recorded the moment, knowing history had just entered the room. And yet, the man at the center did not flinch. He stood as if rooted in stone, shoulders squared, silence his only reply. Around him, the tension swelled, each second louder than the last. The chairman's spit flew, his ring glinting under the fluorescent light, as he shouted again, "You're finished here. You're nothing without us." But in that silence, carved sharp, deliberate, and unbreakable, lay the kind of power that doesn't beg, doesn't bend, doesn't even blink. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus, the man they thought they could erase with a single word. The guard's grip tightened. Phones kept recording. Somewhere, a stifled laugh slipped from a young board member who seemed to know this was no ordinary firing. This was a storm waiting to break. And Marcus Carter, silent in the eye of it, had already decided, if they wanted a spectacle, he would give them one. The guard's hand didn't loosen. His grip hardened. A silent message. Move or be moved. The room, lined with glass and steel, had become a theater of humiliation. Every breath echoed. Every shuffle of shoes was a verdict. A board member in a gray suit chuckled under his breath. "Look at him. Doesn't even fight back. Guess he knows it's over." Another leaned toward her neighbor. "Should have seen this coming. Men like him never last." The chairman seized on their whispers like fuel. His voice boomed again. "Marcus Carter, you are no longer welcome in this building. You're a liability, and this company will thrive without you." His words sliced the silence, but Marcus still didn't move. He let the accusations hang in the air, heavy, ugly, and deliberate. His stillness made them sweat more than any rebuttal could. The guard tugged his arm slightly, testing resistance. Marcus shifted his eyes, slow and deliberate, meeting the guard's gaze. Calm, controlled. The kind of stare that asked, "Do you really know what you're doing?" The guard hesitated, just for a second, then pushed forward. A young assistant at the far end raised her phone higher. The red record light glowed, a quiet rebellion against the spectacle. Another junior member bit her lip, conflicted, her pen trembling against the notepad. "Don't record this," barked the head of HR, her pearl necklace quivering with each word. "This is a private matter." But the damage was done. Half the room had their lenses up, eyes wide, waiting for the next spark. The chairman leaned closer, pointing a gold-ringed finger inches from Marcus's face. "Say something. Defend yourself if you can." Marcus blinked once. That was all. The silence hit harder than any shouted defense. The chairman's jaw twitched. The board shifted in their seats, discomfort spreading like a slow fire. "Pathetic," one muttered. "Escort him out already," another demanded. The guard pressed harder, his palm heavy on Marcus's shoulder. "Sir, you need to leave," he said, tone clipped, rehearsed. But his voice lacked conviction. Marcus finally moved, not to rise, not to resist, but to rest his hands calmly on the polished table. The wood gleamed under the weight of his presence. His voice had not yet entered the room, but already it felt like he was the one holding court. From the corner, a woman whispered to her colleague, "Why isn't he fighting back? It's almost like he's waiting." Her words trailed off, swallowed by the thickening air. And in that moment, as the chairman raised his hand to signal again, Marcus inhaled slow, steady, controlled. The storm was gathering, and it was moving on his time. "Get him out!" The chairman's roar cracked through the air like glass shattering. He slammed his palm against the table, rattling pens and water glasses. His face burned red, veins crawling up his temple. The guard shifted closer, gripping Marcus by the arm now, pulling with the force of an eviction. Chairs scraped against the polished floor as board members leaned back, eager to watch the fall. "This isn't your house anymore," one senior director sneered, his cufflinks glinting in the sterile light. "You've embarrassed us long enough." Another joined in, her voice sharp and venomous. "This company doesn't need dead weight pretending to lead." The words hit the room like arrows, each one meant to pierce dignity. Still, Marcus did not rise. His posture remained rooted, calm against the storm, silence cutting sharper than any rebuttal. But the insults escalated. "Fraud. Imposter. Affirmative action gone wrong." The chorus swelled until the boardroom wasn't a place of governance anymore, it was a courtroom of cruelty. One junior member, no older than 28, looked sick to her stomach. She whispered, barely audible, "This isn't right." But the words drowned under the jeers. The HR director folded her arms, eyes narrowed, voice dripping with disdain. "Security, drag him out. He's wasting our time." The guard tensed, preparing to yank Marcus to his feet. His hand pressed harder into Marcus's shoulder, knuckles whitening. A sharp intake of breath ran through the room, half shock, half satisfaction. Yet Marcus's eyes didn't waver. He lifted them slowly to meet the chairman's, steady as stone. It was not defiance. It was something colder. A patience so sharp it unsettled the very men who thought they'd won. The chairman snarled, leaning so close his spit flecked Marcus's cheek. "You're done here. You hear me? Done." And that was when the silence shifted. Not from Marcus, but from the room itself. The young assistant's camera trembled in her hands as she kept recording. Another board member, conflicted, glanced at his phone under the table, already searching Marcus's name as if to confirm what he really knew. The tension was unbearable, the kind that makes walls themselves seem to lean in. Every insult had been thrown. Every ounce of arrogance had been spent. All that was left was a single question. Why wasn't Marcus fighting back? The guard tugged again. The chairman smirked, convinced he'd broken the man in front of him. But beneath that silence, beneath the steady eyes and anchored frame, something unseen had already shifted. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The guard's grip tightened, ready to haul him from the chair. The chairman leaned back, smug now, as if the spectacle were complete. A chorus of whispers buzzed across the table. This was the end of Marcus Carter. But Marcus moved first. Not a struggle, not a shout. Just one hand, sliding slowly into the inside pocket of his jacket. The room stiffened, eyes narrowing. The guard froze, waiting. Marcus withdrew a slim black phone, placed it on the table, and pressed a single button. "Carla," he said, voice calm, steady, and low enough to make the entire boardroom lean in. "Activate Protocol Sigma." A pause. Then a crisp voice echoed through the speaker. "Confirmed. Protocol Sigma engaged." Immediately, the wall-mounted screens behind the chairman flickered. Company logos dissolved into encrypted dashboards, rows of data and timestamps appearing in real time. The boardroom gasped. "What is this?" the chairman barked, slamming his hand against the table. Marcus didn't look at him. He hadn't looked at anyone yet. His eyes were fixed forward, as if he'd been here before, as if he knew this exact moment was inevitable. The HR director's pearls trembled as she hissed, "Turn that off! This is unauthorized!" Carla's voice responded evenly through the speaker. "Negative. Protocol Sigma is a preset compliance safeguard authorized only by the CEO." Silence crashed. The word hung there, CEO. The guard stepped back an inch, confusion flickering across his face. One board member, pale now, muttered, What is he doing?" Another leaned toward his neighbor, whispering, "He can't. He doesn't still have access, does he?" Marcus finally moved his gaze, lifting it to the chairman. Calm, patient, inevitable. "You thought you ended this story," he said quietly. "You just started mine." The screens scrolled faster, exposing files tagged with names, contracts, secret amendments signed without full board approval. A few faces went white as their own signatures flashed in front of the room. "This is nonsense!" the chairman shouted, but his voice cracked at the edges. "Shut it down!" Carla's voice returned, crisp and unshaken. "Shut down not available. Compliance protocol locked. Evidence streaming live to secured servers." The assistant with the camera lowered her phone slightly, her eyes wide. She whispered to the person beside her, "He planned this. He's not losing control. He's taking it." And Marcus, still seated, still silent for the most part, let the storm unfold, not with anger, not with force, but with the quiet certainty of a man who knew he'd never truly left his throne. The wall-sized screens glowed brighter, lines of contracts spilling down like confessions carved in light. Each page carried signatures, familiar names in the room. Board members stiffened as their own handwriting stared back at them. The HR director leaned forward, panic rising. "This is fabricated. He's staging this." But her voice wavered, thin against the silence swallowing the room. Marcus didn't flinch. His hands remained folded, his breathing steady. It wasn't just a display. It was a mirror, showing each of them exactly what they had tried to bury. Carla's voice came through again, clinical and cold. Document 14. B. Unauthorized severance package approved without majority vote. Signed, Chairman Leonard Hayes. All eyes snapped to the chairman, his face drained to chalk. He slammed the table. "Stop reading! This is irrelevant!" Document 22. C. Conflict of interest contract awarded to Hayes and Sons Consulting. Value, $12 million. Gasps broke out. A junior member's phone wobbled in her hand as she whispered, "It's true. He signed it himself." The chairman's glare cut across the table, desperate. "Do not listen to this. He's manipulating the system." But his voice was weaker now, drowned by the glow of the evidence. Another board member tried to rise, his chair screeching against the polished floor. I didn't know he still had clearance." His words tumbled over themselves, panic eating his composure. Marcus finally spoke, his voice steady as stone. "You called me a fraud in my own house. But fraud doesn't leave a paper trail this clean." The words cut deeper than any insult. The guard stepped back fully now, hands retreating from Marcus's arm. His eyes flicked to the chairman, then back to the man he had almost dragged out. Doubt flickered across his face. At the far end, the young assistant with the recording phone whispered to her colleague. "He never raised his voice. Not once." The colleague replied, almost reverent, "He doesn't need to. Look at them, they're unraveling themselves." The HR director tried one last time, voice shrill, breaking. "You're humiliating this company." Marcus turned his head slowly, meeting her eyes. "No, you humiliated it the moment you forgot who built it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Phones trembled in hands. Eyes darted between screens and signatures. The truth was no longer hidden, and the weight of it pressed down harder than any guard's hand ever could. And as the boardroom sat trapped in their own reflection, Marcus remained anchored in his chair. Not shouting, not moving, just watching the storm he'd summoned calm, patient, unstoppable. The screens kept cycling page after page, signature after signature. Each line tore deeper into the facade of control the board once flaunted. The chairman sat rigid, jaw locked, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Then came the voice. "I saw it." The words were soft, almost hesitant, but in the thick silence they landed like thunder. All heads turned toward the speaker, a young analyst, seated at the far edge of the table. Her notepad lay forgotten, her hands trembling, but her voice steadied with each word. "I logged these documents last month," she continued, her gaze fixed on the chairman. "I raised questions. You told me to delete the records. You said they were clerical mistakes." A collective gasp rippled through the boardroom. Phones angled closer. The chairman's face flushed deep crimson. "Lies!" he barked, slamming his palm down again. "She's confused, inexperienced." But the analyst cut across him, louder now. "No, I remember every word, and now everyone else can see them too." Her voice trembled, but her courage didn't falter. She pushed her chair back, standing tall for the first time since the meeting began. "You called him a fraud, but it wasn't him, it was you." The air fractured. For the first time, the insults weren't aimed at Marcus, they ricocheted back toward the very people who had hurled them. The HR director stammered, "You don't know what you're saying." But another voice joined in, this time from an older member seated near the center. His tone was heavy, reluctant, but undeniable. "She's right. We've buried too much, and now it's staring us in the face." The guard stepped further back, arms now crossed, his stance no longer protective of the chairman, but neutral, watchful. Marcus hadn't moved. He hadn't needed to. His silence had become a stage where the truth performed itself. He leaned back slightly, eyes sweeping the room, letting them unravel. The chairman's voice cracked, desperate now. "Do you all forget who runs this board? Do you forget who signs your—" "No," the analyst's voice rang sharp, firm. "We forget nothing. That's why this matters." Every phone in the room was up now. The recording lights glowed like a constellation, documenting every twitch, every denial, every crack in the mask. And in that storm of evidence and voices rising, Marcus finally spoke again, low but commanding. You mistook silence for submission. That was your last mistake. The room stilled. Even the air seemed to freeze, waiting for the next blow. The chairman's chair screeched back as he shot to his feet. His face was no longer flushed with power, it was burning with panic. He snatched a folder from the table, yanked the papers free, and tore them down the middle. The sound of ripping contracts cracked through the room like thunder. "This is garbage," he shouted, veins bulging at his neck. "None of this is valid. It dies here now." But the screens behind him didn't blink. The documents he shredded appeared again, pristine and digital, time-stamped and logged. Carla's voice, calm as a scalpel, drifted through the speaker. Destruction of physical copies detected. Digital records remain immutable. Chain of custody secured. The boardroom gasped. The chairman's outburst had achieved nothing except exposing his desperation. Then his eyes snapped toward the young analyst who had spoken up. Rage twisted his face. "Give me that phone," he barked, lunging across the table. Gasps erupted as he swiped for her device, knocking a glass of water to the floor. She stumbled back, clutching the phone to her chest, eyes wide with fear. "You don't record me," he bellowed. "You don't get to decide what this board remembers." Two other board members scrambled to intervene, pulling him away. The analyst's breath trembled, but she didn't drop the phone. Every second of his fury was still recording. Marcus hadn't moved, but his eyes tracked the scene with surgical calm. His silence had become heavier than the chairman's shouts. "Security!" the chairman roared, pointing at Marcus now with a hand that shook. "Arrest him! Detain him! He's trespassing! He's a criminal!" The guard hesitated. His stance faltered. He looked at Marcus, then at the glowing evidence on the screens, then back to the man screaming orders like a drowning man clawing for air. Finally, he muttered, "Sir, this doesn't look right." The chairman's roar cracked into a shriek. "That's an order!" But the order rang hollow. The guard didn't move. Phones stayed raised. Every eye in the room had shifted, no longer toward Marcus, but toward the crumbling man who had once commanded them. Marcus finally leaned forward, his voice cutting clean through the chaos. "You called me an imposter. You tried to erase me, and now you're erasing yourself." The words dropped like a verdict, and as the chairman staggered, clutching the shredded remains of his authority, the room knew. The tide had turned. Marcus rose. For the first time since the chairman's outburst, he stood. Not rushed, not forced, just deliberate, steady, and final. The shift was seismic. The guard stepped back instinctively. The room seemed smaller, the table suddenly too fragile to hold what was coming. "Enough," Marcus said, voice low, but it carried across every corner of the boardroom. "You want evidence? Let's walk through it together." He tapped his phone once more. The screens behind the chairman froze, then magnified a single document. The font was unmistakable, the numbers undeniable. A wire transfer of $10 million routed through a shell company. The recipient's name flashed bright. "Document 31, F," Carla's voice narrated. "Unauthorized transfer. Approved and signed by Director Amanda Lowell." All eyes swiveled to Amanda, the same board member who had sneered minutes earlier about Marcus being dead weight. Her face drained, lips parting in disbelief. That was, she stammered, collapsing back into her chair. It was approved. Everyone knew. But the silence answered for her. Everyone knew nothing, and now everyone knew the truth. Marcus's gaze didn't linger on her. He tapped again. Another document bloomed across the screen. Falsified performance reports. Doctored numbers meant to bury losses under Marcus's leadership. At the bottom, in digital ink, sat the chairman's signature. "Fraud," Marcus said evenly. "Not mine. Yours." The word echoed with the weight of a gavel. The phones around the room trembled in hands. Every board member knew this wasn't just a meeting anymore, it was evidence. Live streamed to servers that couldn't be erased, recorded on half a dozen devices capturing every second. The HR director slammed her hand down, pearls rattling. "You can't do this! You're not the CEO anymore!" Marcus cut her off, his voice slicing like a blade. "You don't decide that. The bylaws do. And according to them, until a vote is properly executed, I remain in control. Every action taken without procedure, null and void." Gasps filled the air. Even the guard muttered under his breath, "He's right." The chairman staggered, clutching the shredded papers in his fists like they could still save him. But the room no longer belonged to him. Marcus stepped forward, each word deliberate, sharp. You tried to bury me with silence, with shame, with lies. But the deeper you dig, the clearer it becomes this isn't my grave. It's your confession. The weight of his words settled heavy. Phones kept recording. The evidence glowed. The boardroom, once united against him, now fractured under the sheer force of truth. And Marcus Carter, silent no longer, stood in the center of it all, not as the accused, but as the judge. The boardroom had turned into a cage of silence. Papers lay shredded on the floor, screens burned with damning proof, and every phone in the room captured the fall of those who once believed themselves untouchable. Marcus stepped forward, his presence commanding, his voice calm but resonant. You've called me many things tonight, fraud. Imposter. Dead weight. Let me give you a word you forgot, owner. A ripple spread through the room. The chairman scoffed, desperate. Owner? You are fired. You have nothing. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a slim leather folder. He laid it flat on the table, opening it slowly. Inside was a single document, stamped, sealed, irrefutable. 42%, he said evenly. Controlling interest, the largest share in this company, purchased quietly, legally, and long before you conspired to erase me. Gasps tore through the room. One director covered her mouth. Another cursed under his breath. The analyst who had spoken earlier whispered, "He owns them. He owns all of them." The chairman lurched forward, snatching the paper with trembling hands, scanning it desperately. His lips moved, but no words came. The seal glared back at him, undeniable. "No," he muttered. This isn't possible." Marcus's eyes locked on him, steady and unblinking. "It's not only possible, it's done. Every decision you made against me, every attempt to cut me out, it's invalid. Because you cannot fire the man who owns the seat you're sitting in." The room erupted. Voices overlapped in panic. "He has the majority? What does that mean for us? Is everything we signed void?" The guard, once ready to drag Marcus out, stepped aside completely now, eyes lowered in respect. He knew, as did everyone else, that power had just shifted in a single heartbeat. The HR director stammered, clutching her pearls like armor. This changes nothing. We still control the board." Marcus turned, his gaze sharp enough to still her words mid-breath. "You controlled nothing. You confused volume for authority, paperwork for power. But power is silent. Power waits. And tonight, it waited for you to reveal yourselves." The phones kept rolling, recording every second. The chairman slumped back into his chair, face pale, hands trembling over the proof of his own defeat. And in that moment, the hierarchy inverted. The accusers became the accused. The hunted became the hunter. The man they tried to erase now stood above them, not as a victim but as the architect of their undoing. The revelation detonated like a silent bomb. No alarms, no explosions, just the slow, suffocating implosion of a room where every lie had run out of air. One director slammed his laptop shut, muttering frantically, This can't be binding. There has to be a loophole." His hands shook as he typed on his phone, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Another, Amanda Lowell, the same woman whose name had burned across the screens, clutched her handbag like a lifeline. "Marcus, listen," she stammered, voice cracking. We were misled. Leonard pushed us into those contracts. I was only following the majority." The chairman whipped his head toward her, eyes blazing. "Coward," he hissed. "You signed every document without question." Amanda snapped back, desperation flaring. "And you told us to. Don't drag me down with you." The room fractured further. A senior director with silver hair tried to rise above the chaos, hands raised. "We can fix this. Marcus, we can negotiate." His words collapsed under the weight of Marcus's silence. Phones never lowered. The analyst's camera captured every unraveling thread, every stutter, every betrayal spilling across the polished table. The world outside these walls would see it all. The HR director's pearls clicked nervously as she whispered to the colleague beside her. "We'll be ruined. If this gets out, it's not just him, it's us. All of us." Her colleague only shook his head, sweat beading down his temple. The guard who once pressed Marcus down now stood at parade rest, gaze fixed on the chairman. The balance of loyalty had shifted. No one could mistake it now. The chairman slammed his fist against the shredded papers, voice splintering into desperation. "Don't you see what he's doing? He's destroying us!" But another voice cut in a director once silent, now emboldened. "No, you destroyed us when you forgot who built this company. He's just reminding you. The chairman froze, eyes darting as realization spread. The room was no longer his. The power had leaked from his grasp, flowing toward the man he had tried to erase. Marcus remained at the head of the table, his figure carved in composure. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to demand. The board was collapsing under the weight of its own guilt, each member unraveling in front of the cameras. And in that collapse, a single truth became undeniable. Marcus Carter hadn't just reclaimed control, he had exposed the fragility of those who thought they controlled him. Marcus straightened, his presence no longer quiet background, but the undeniable center of gravity in the room. Phone stayed high, eyes stayed locked. The chaos had peaked, now came judgment. "Carla," he said calmly into the phone resting on the table. "Begin immediate personnel actions." Her voice returned, precise, unshaken. "Understood. Please confirm names." Marcus's gaze cut across the room, each word delivered like a sentence. "Leonard Hayes, terminated. Effective immediately. Lock his access. Freeze his accounts." The chairman lurched forward. "You can't—" But before he could finish, a sharp buzz rang out. His access badge on the table lit red, then went dark. Gasps erupted as the system stripped him in real time. He slammed his fist down, but his power was gone. Marcus didn't blink. "Amanda Lowell, terminated. Access revoked." Amanda's phone screen went black in her trembling hand. She dropped it onto the table, staring in horror. "Please, Marcus, listen, I can explain." But he had already moved on. "Evelyn Shaw, Director of HR, terminated. Lock her files." Evelyn's pearls rattled as her laptop snapped shut by itself, the Horizon system cutting her out completely. Her scream rose, sharp and desperate, but the sound was swallowed by the room's cold air. Marcus paused only to let the silence deepen. Then, effective immediately, these individuals no longer represent Horizon. Security protocols engaged. Carla's voice answered, crisp. Processing complete. Credentials revoked. The guard once ordered to drag Marcus away now stepped forward. Not to touch him, but to collect the badges of those just stripped of power. One by one, he placed them on the table, small plastic coffins marking the end of their reign. The surviving directors looked on in stunned silence, some pale, some trembling, all realizing the tide was irreversible. The chairman shouted again, his voice cracking, "This is tyranny! You'll destroy us all!" Marcus finally turned to him, his voice a quiet blade. "No, I'm saving this company from you. You built it on lies. I'll rebuild it on truth." Every phone caught the line. The boardroom froze, the world outside waiting to echo it back. The reckoning was no longer a threat. It had already happened. The badges lay scattered across the polished table like fallen crowns. The chairman slumped in his chair, stripped of title, stripped of control, his eyes vacant as the reality sank in. Amanda stared at her blank phone screen as though she could will it back to life. Evelyn clutched her pearls until the string nearly snapped, and Marcus Carter stood tall. He scanned the room not with anger, not with triumph, but with the steady calm of a man who had fought this battle 1,000 times in silence and finally chose to end it in the open. "Power," Marcus said, his voice carrying like a tide, "was never in the shouting. It was never in the seats you occupied or the signatures you forged. Power is in the truth, and the truth outlives every lie." The room was silent except for the soft hum of the screens. Phones remained lifted, but no one moved, as if afraid even their breathing might disturb the weight of his words. Marcus turned his gaze toward the younger members, the ones who had recorded, the ones who had dared to whisper. His eyes softened just slightly. "You will rebuild this company, not on arrogance, not on prejudice, but on merit and vision. I'll ensure it." Carla's voice cut through once more. "All terminations processed. Evidence archived. Transition protocols ready." Marcus nodded, then looked back at the board, at the ruins of men and women who had underestimated him. "Tonight you tried to erase me. You tried to make me small, but I don't need to shout or beg or fight for my place, because my place was never yours to give or take." He stepped away from the table, the weight of authority following him, not them. Each step echoed against the marble floor, steady, inevitable. At the door, he paused, his final words, clear, deliberate, unforgettable. "I don't need to record this moment. I am the result of it." With that, he walked out. Behind him, silence swallowed the boardroom. Not the silence of victory or defeat, but the silence of truth, settling in, irreversible and eternal. And in the eyes of every witness, every lens, every recording, one reality stood. Dignity doesn't raise its voice. It simply stands, unshaken.